Hi, everyone. So actually, the last slide of Kevin Mitchell's presentation is the perfect segue into ours because he had a couple of chairs, and we are obsessed with chairs, as you're going to see today. So as we were just introduced, I'm Manar Moursi, and this is David Puig. David will talk a little bit about himself. I'm the founder of Studio Meme. It's an architecture or an interdisciplinary design studio based in Cairo. We work on projects from writing about the city to product design to projects in public space. So as I mentioned earlier, it's an interdisciplinary design studio in Cairo. We write about the city. We do product design. And projects in public space. And as well as more product design. This is a wonder box. This is a park. This is a house that was designed in Kuwait. And this is a competition, house in Kuwait. And David.
Well, I'm David Puig. I am from the Dominican Republic, and I've been living in Cairo for the past 5 years. I work as a diplomat, but I'm also involved in book making in a large sense. I write, I translate, I edit, and I run a small publishing house in the Dominican Republic. And these are some of the books I've edited in the past years. And recently, I edited a photo book called Flow Tropical about popular commercial paintings in the Dominican Republic. So Manar and I have been working in the past 4 years together in Cairo in a photo book that takes the street chairs of Cairo as a tool to explore different dynamics, different urban dynamics of Cairo. So our book, Sidewalk Salon, 1001 Street Chairs of Cairo, has been recently published in a co-production in Holland with Onomatope and in Cairo with Kotob Khan. So in this presentation, in the first part, we will walk in the streets of Cairo, we will wander in the streets of Cairo with Gabriel Tard, who is a French sociologist who in the 19th century developed two concepts, the concept of imitation and innovation, two concepts that have helped us a lot in our work, but that also resonate immensely with the copy-paste theme of the conference. In the second part, that will be the part of Manar, we will go in a more self-reflecting direction, and we will use the ideas of a French art critic, Nicolas Bourriaud, who wrote a book called Post-Production. And using his ideas, what we will try to show you is how by examining something from the streets of Cairo, like the street chair, like a very banal object, how by copy-pasting the chairs that we're documenting from the streets to our book, and by adding different layers of text, of interviews, of essays, of fiction, we aim to create a singular object, a singular book, and to trigger a discussion about the urban spaces of Cairo, and in general, at large, about the urban spaces at large in different cities. So I will start with the first part, and I think it takes just a few steps in a new city to start to notice its specific character and its peculiar vibrations. If we focus on the built characteristics of the urban space, we can say that each city is a set of recognizable elements established by planning and shaped by rules enforced by governing authorities. Those are the dimensions of the urban space that are determined top-down and by the state, by local governments, and as Kevin mentioned, by architects, urban planners, and real estate developers. So on one extreme, we can say we have cities like Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, which are extremely planned. And on the other hand, we have cities where the driving force of shaping the urban space is more like the market and the real estate. So moving from the aerial view of the city, which you can see in the slides, to more details at the street level, we can also notice other recognizable elements of that vary from one city to the other. And for example, trees, something that we tend not to notice, are also things that are determined by planning. For example, if you see this image from Amman, you can see how not only the kind of trees that we have, but also how they're trimmed, how they're sculptured. And if we go to the next slides, we'll see the acacia. Like in Cairo, you have many trees, but you have the Indian laurel and the acacia, which are the two main trees that you will find in the streets of Cairo. And not only they kind of, visually shape the city, but they also create a particular atmosphere. Like everyone knows when those trees will flower, everyone knows that in a particular season, the acacia loses the leaves and that they start falling like confetti, like yellow confetti that cover everything. But the planned elements of the city, like the ones we just mentioned, are always combined with more horizontal pattern established by the users of the city who appropriate the built environment on their own terms and transform it. Those informal or people-oriented dynamics are more important in third world cities where the state either can't enforce very strong regulations on the urban space or can't provide services and public amenities. And Cairo is, of course, one of those cities, where the public space is really shaped and by the people. And one very clear and evident example is the occupation of public space for leisure. And one of those public spaces is the space of the sidewalk. And in Cairo, the sidewalk is really, really completely appropriated, and particularly in poor and middle-class neighborhoods where houses are small, where houses don't have big balconies, where salons are very, very, very small, and people use the sidewalk as meeting grounds and to gather, no? And the sidewalks basically play the role of non-existent balconies and verandas and become wider and more comfortable versions of tiny and congested salons. They are playground spaces, spaces for pool games and tennis table games. And in a very dense city with crowded apartments and relatively few public spaces, the most natural gathering ground are the sidewalks. Another very striking and interesting appropriation of public space in Cairo are the coffee houses. They come in all shapes and size, and they offer usually indoor and outdoor seating. And basically what happens is that cafes expand beyond the boundaries of their doors. And when they have too many clients, like tables and chairs are constantly arranged and rearranged in the sidewalks as the clients come and go. And if you take like an aerial shot like these ones of the cafes, what you will see, or what it brings to mind, is like archipelagos of moving islands, the chairs, where new atolls pop up and disappear through to the day and the night. All sorts of economic activities also leave their imprints in the urban space of Cairo. And just to take one example, we can look at the very recognizable fixture of the landscape of Cairo, which are the kiosks that sell soda, cigarettes, chips, etc. All those kiosks are different in shape and size, but they really share a common element that make them like recognizable as kiosks of the city of Cairo. And those common elements have as much to do with what these kiosks sell, so the goods, as they have to do as how they are organized, because all these kiosks share a common architecture of the displays of the goods on sale, where the fridge, the spread of chocolates and sweets, the colorful walls of carton boxes of chips and crate speak a common language. So street dwellers, as we're seeing, animate the sidewalk of the city with their presence, but they also transform the built environment. They modify the structure of the existing sidewalks and construct on their own missing public amenities. In the informal settlements, which constitute the major part of Cairo, sidewalks are non-existent or have a very fragmented presence. Where sidewalks are missing, what people do is that they build it themselves in front of their buildings. Even in the few rich areas of Cairo where they exist in a continuous form, sidewalks are not flat, uniform, and uninterrupted gray ribbons, but irregular patches of different paving patterns. People basically repair the sidewalk themselves when the paving breaks, or they decide to change the flooring of the sidewalks in front of their shops to make the entrance to their shops more attractive to potential buyers. So we will now present the main concepts of Gabriel Tard in relation to the copy-paste syndrome and show you how they help us to understand this kind of horizontal patterns in the urban setting. For Gabriel Tard, this 19th century sociologist, all social phenomena can be understood as the result of three dynamics: the dynamic of imitation, the dynamic of innovation, and the dynamic of opposition. And out of those three forces, Gabriel Tard tells us the main dynamic is the dynamic of imitation. Imitation is the most basic and usual pattern of interaction between individuals. Every day, we acquire from each other's ways of seeing, ways of talking, moving, and working, and we integrate patterns and repeat them. But the social world is not stagnant. It is dynamic and in perpetual movement. Individuals also have the capacity to innovate and to introduce new ways of doing things. When Tard talks about innovation, he doesn't necessarily talk about big scientific discovery. On the contrary, his approach is really about everyday life, and it has been coined as micro-sociological. When an innovation appears, it challenges older ways of doing things, and this is what Tard called the dynamic of opposition. An innovation always represents a challenge to the status quo, and its success depends on how it's welcomed by the people who will then share it and start repeating it. So according to Tard, imitation can be conscious or unconscious, voluntary or involuntary, but they are never mechanical. Even when we are imitating and repeating something unconsciously, the action in itself is generating something new and is working towards innovation. Repetition are in favor of innovations, Tard wrote. Repeating and copying is thus seen as the seed of innovation. Imitation is by itself a displacement, even if it's a small displacement, but it introduces change. But even when we talk about like more conscious innovations, about the work of a designer, of an artist, of a writer, we have to see the imitation as the seed, as the source of the innovation. Tard writes that invention is always, by its very nature, an intersection of imitation rays, an original combination of imitations. Conscious innovations are smart or a new combination of existing ideas. And this expanded notion of creation is linked with the notions of appropriation, recycling, mixing, and of course with copy-paste. I think we're running a bit out of time, so I'm going to just show you a few examples. So the concepts of Tard are a perfect tool to understand patterns established by the users of the city and their evolution in the urban environment of Cairo. And they prove to be extremely useful to our understanding of the kind of dynamics we studied for our book, Sidewalk Salon. In over 50 walks in the streets of Cairo from 2011 to 2014, we took more than 1,000 Polaroids of street chairs. We soon realized that chairs found in different parts of the city had been repaired by their owner using almost identical and very specific techniques. For example, we will find in different areas different ways of people using wood to reinforce their chairs. I think we can pass on different examples. I mean, we will also find wood prostheses and stone prostheses, how people will change kind of the base of the chair. We found different ways of stitching the back of the chairs, different ways of cartoning and cushioning the chairs. But basically, if we use the concepts of Tard, of innovation and imitation, we can clearly see that at some moment there is a technique of street design that are discovered and they solve a problem. And those successful techniques are replicated by imitation. They are copied and they spread. And the spread of those techniques are like tweets that get retweeted because people are interested in them, and they continue to share that by adding their own personal comments. Few more examples of the same issues, but I think the more or less you get the idea.
Of a water cooler to create a sabil, as you see in the left-hand side. So a chair is not just a chair, it's also a prop that has multiple uses. Or to reserve parking spots. And it's a technique that's repeated over and over again in the city. Or even as an urban scarecrow to mark a bawab or a territory, or that someone is there watching you. So I'm going to talk in the second part of the presentation about how the making of our book, Sidewalk Salon, 1001 Street Chairs of Cairo, how we use creatively the copy-paste method. And the point of departure of our book is that we were really just collecting a pre-existing archive of images, or not images, of chairs that were in the sidewalk, and we were just sort of pasting them onto the different pages of our book. But our intervention was how we sort of mixed the material together, and that's why we called our talk Sidewalk DJs. So our book is not about our own creations. It's more about the creations of the people on the sidewalk. And the images that we took were always in the same sort of frontal perspective, framed with a consistent Polaroid frame. We used the Polaroid because of that formal aspect, but also because it facilitated an exchange with the owners who would want their own personal portraits taken in exchange of the photos we took of their chairs. And because it had this kind of faded aesthetic that matched the unkempt sort of aesthetic of Cairo sidewalks that the digital images didn't have. But the other visual material that is included in our book is found images, images from the press that show chairs in different moments throughout the uprising. And here you see a chair used as a weapon in street battles and fights, and here again. And here you see it in another kind of incarnation where it represents the throne, because the idea of kursi Moursi or kursi al-arsh and power, and this idea of kursi Moursi was running throughout our interviews with the chair owners. So Nicolas Bourriaud talks about the idea of post-production. And he talks about the idea of mixing things, as I mentioned. And the closest figure to that is the DJ. He says the contemporary artist uses like pre-existing archives, and the question for him shifts from what new things can we produce to what can we do with what we have. So the questions raised by Sidewalk Salon about the urban space of Cairo are the results of the way in which we organize the visual material we collected, as well as the way in which we combined the texts we commissioned and the texts we wrote with this visual material. So as David mentioned in passing quickly, that the first and more evident layer of meaning was through the recycling techniques, or the way that people collage or create their own chair, copying and pasting from multiple things around them in the sidewalk and the limited resources that they have. And to highlight this point, our book is organized with these thematic kind of series in mind, such as the wood, reinforcement, and this is another one, the chair in a chair. It's one of our favorite ones. It's the idea of merging or putting two chairs together to create a reinforced chair that can support many hours on the sidewalk. Other is cushioning or dressing. Here is one in a religious attire, one in a fur kind of attire. So the chairs also have different outfits. And they also support different things on the sidewalk, like the water sabils that David showed earlier, or mannequins, or arusat al-mulad, or newspapers, or even shoe polish. So, but if we zoom out from these particular images that we have and look at the chairs in their context, a whole set of new questions opens up. So we shift from the gaze as the chairs as curious objects that have their own story to the intersection of these images with a set of complex social relations. Placed in the urban space, a chair is a perspective and a point of view to look at Cairo from below. Acting at times as a zoom and wide-angle lens, we try to appropriate the street chairs as tools to reveal intimate details and collective aspects of the urban environment. They allowed us to raise questions regarding the unequal socioeconomic order of Cairo. Why are people spending so many hours on the sidewalk? What's happening in terms of employment? The gender dynamics. How do women feel if the majority of the people occupying the sidewalk are men? And even political dynamics, as I mentioned, this idea of like the verticality of the chair from the pharaonic throne to Ayt al-Kursi to the Kursi of Moursi, and this kind of prevailing or predominant question that was on people's mind as we were doing the project. So we became aware of this while we were walking, and we decided that the best way to reveal this is to conduct interviews with the chair owners. And in these interviews, we asked them about these different elements. What do you think of Kursi Moursi? What do you think of Kursi Ayt al-Kursi? What's the most significant thing that you've seen? Because some people would spend 12 hours a day for the past, 50 years in the same spot in the sidewalk. And so they had a sort of micro history of that particular chunk of the city. And so their answers and the interviews are transcribed in the book. We also commissioned fiction and poetry to different writers. And one of the writers wrote about a portable sort of seat made out of a crate that an informal vegetable vendor puts her vegetables in it, but she also uses it as a chair Amira Hanafi has a poem, which is the Dictionary of the Revolution. It's a collection of all of the Arabic words that sort of appeared in waves and then kind of disappeared as things were changing in the city. And of course, amongst them are Kursi, Hizb al-Kanaba, the couch party, are the people who watched the revolution from the comfort of their living room rather than actively participating. And then finally, the other element of how we organize our visual material is 3 map inserts that show our process of creating the book and our walks throughout the city. And so on one side, you have a map with our path and different pins, and a selection on the other side with the corresponding images for the map. And we try to show the different urban fabrics, like this is New Cairo. And also the different kinds of chairs, because New Cairo has these completely new plastic security guard chairs versus Shubra, which has a more layered kind of chair design. And then our essay was the framework in which the whole book was kind of framed, how all the different disparate elements that we mixed and put together come together, and we sort of elaborate on different themes that I talked about earlier, and one of those is the idea of the eyes on the sidewalk, that people are constantly watching you, something that Jane Jacobs, a very famous kind of journalist and urban sociologist, elaborated on about New York. It's called do-it-yourself surveillance, as she called it, or this idea of safety on the sidewalk that comes from people always sitting there. But in Egypt, in a different context, it does ensure safety on the one hand, but it also causes some kind of insecurity to some factions of the population, such as women who are walking and therefore harassed by these men who are sitting there. Or it can also be used as a tool by repressive regimes who use some of these agents as spies, like Bawabs were well-known sort of agents of Amn al-Dawla in Egypt as important spies that know all of the ins and outs of your personal life. And then the other thing we reflected upon in our essay is the idea of this kind of tension that existed in the public space, and the clearance of the chairs most recently post-2011 in the square, but also in different cafes in the neighborhood of downtown as an act of trying to gentrify and change the informality in the city. And so chairs as this kind of, like it was a lens for us to talk about that tension. So our book is available outside at the yard. And other than the book, we are now working, or we've worked with a couple of different artists to further take the material and remix it and create their own material. And most recently, in Dutch Design Week, we exhibited some of this work in our book launch with our publisher in Holland. And we will be launching the book with an exhibition in Cairo in January 2016, and we hope to see some of you there. And some of the material, for example, is this map-based interface in which designer and developer Rana Gohari is creating a way to browse our archive in a different way through other walks that are not included in the book. And you can listen to different interviews rather than just read the transcripts, as well as experience other fictions and stories. And finally, we commissioned different films to different artists, Aida Keshef, Sara, and Selma Amir, and we're going to show you and close with this film. We will be around during the coffee break to sign the book if any of you would like that, and we'll be around the rest of the afternoon. So this is one of the short videos that was done for the exhibition.
الأفكار المختلفة ما بين العناصر اللي ماشية. هو الكرسي بيبقى عادي جدا جدا، بنجيب شوية خشب وبنعمل 4 رجلين ومن فوق بتتعمل القعدة. نرجع كلكم من آدم وآدم من تراب. كل البشرية اللي بتلف حواليكي هي شخص واحد.
الحاجات المضحكه اللي في الشارع بس في حاجات بتظهر قدامك في الشارع بتضحك عليها، مثلا حد بيتخانق مع بعض،
واحد راجع بظهره فواحد اللي وراه بيشاور له عشان يرجعه قام داس عليه.
على قد ما بتزعل على قد ما بتضحك برضه.
ان البلد حزين، عايزين البلد تمشي. هو الموقف ده. عايزين الناس تاكل عيش وده ياكل عيش وده ياكل عيش. يركب في الكرسي ما بينزلش بالسهل. يركب على الكرسي ما بينزلش.
كرسي زي ايه كرسي؟
ممكن يكون زي الكراسي بتاعت الملك بتاعت زمان.
ده مطون ومربع ومدهب وشو حاجه شيك، تقعد على الكرسي تتقصع لورا مش زي ده اكل فخاتله من تحت.
في ناس كتير عندها طموحات في كرسي مرسي يعني، فاحنا الحمد لله لينا طموحات في الكرسي بتاعنا. يعني ايه كل ما واحد يجي يرمي حاجه بتاعته او بيبيع حاجه يعني نقول لهم لا هناخد الكرسي ده، ممكن 6 اشهر سنه بيستهلك ونروح نرميه وندور على واحد تاني غيره، ما بنلاقيش حته تانيه هنقعد عليها. عند البوابي اللي هنا قعد حوالي 12 سنه يعني ممكن.
والله انا نفضل الكويس اللي يقعد على الكرسي، مش اي حد يقعد على الكرسي.
هو كراسينا احنا الوحشه وكراسيهم هم الحلوه.
علشان ده بتاع الغلابه حلو.
اكيد طبعا مبطن طبعا وفي
الكرسي مش بشكل الكرسي، برمز الكرسي مش اكتر من كده.
ما احنا لما لقيناه اتكسر فقلنا عشان نلم الظهر بتاعه كده اهوت عملناه بنفس الوضع، يعني قعده الكرسي احسن من قعده الارض.
هي كلها قاعده يعني لما بزق من هنا شويه وبعدين شويه عادي.
بالنسبه للسياسه بقى انا مش هتكلم في السياسه. بسمع كلمه كرسي اول حاجه بفكر فيها اللي انا اقعد.
Thank you.
Great. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Another great subject close to my heart, Cairo, where I was born and raised, and really enjoyed your presentation a lot. I think one of the things that was striking to me about the chair as well is the resilience of the chairs, that they don't want to die. They keep on, you know, it's not like
nothing dies in Cairo.
It's just like the city wants to keep on going and going and going. And unlike, you know, societies that are obsessed with the new things, and as soon as something is slightly old, it's thrown away, or with people getting older off the job. But these chairs, you know, keep on going, and it's really interesting, especially the period of the past, you know, few years. Cairo also is very interesting place because you see this tug of war of the people taking ownership of the street and the authorities pushing them back, and they go back again. And throughout the different times, the city would totally look different. There were times I would go downtown and the merchants would take over downtown. You could barely drive in a single lane downtown.
Yeah.
And then other times they're pushed back, everything is swept and nice and neat. So
it's a tension that's not resolved yet. I mean, it's there. It's
yes,
still
you know, graffiti and counter graffiti.
Yeah.
They paint the wall. مبروك البوية الجديدة. Another graffiti on top. You know, fantastic, great. I'm looking forward to having one copy of your book. That's great. Any questions? أي أسئلة? Tariq, you can tell us about the streets of Cairo. You were there in the Tahrir. You can tell us about. Any questions?
Yeah, small question. You were saying that you did question why people were sitting in these chairs and looking at the people. Do you think that this is something that is particular to Arab countries? Because we have this in Lebanon very, very much. And if so, does it show that this kind of people are lazier than others, or does it have any other connotation? I mean, why is it that they keep sitting on the sidewalks?
I mean, we don't place any sort of value judgment. We definitely know that Egyptians like to socialize and gossip a lot from a lot of the interviews we conducted. I mean, the way we try to answer this question in our book is by asking, you know, people that we interviewed, how many hours do you sit here? What kind of job do you do? And so that was kind of revealing, because a lot of times they're shopkeepers that are just waiting for the next job, or sometimes they have an extra chair so that their friends can come and visit them when they're working throughout the day. But in terms of the coffee house as an institution, yes, it's definitely like an important institution. I mean, we met a fruit and vegetable seller who worked 12 hours a day, and he has a family and everything, and he wakes up at 5 a.m. to go to the market, but yet the most important thing that he does after work, he says, is he has to pass by the ahwa to sit down, catch up with friends. It's a release. And it's, it's an important part of the social life. Just like the Diwaniyah here in Kuwait, the coffee house is really institutional and fundamental, and even politically speaking. Like, it was where, Kulthum sang her first song, where the first revolution was planned in Cafe Riche. El Bustan was the home for this nascent, revolution or uprising, and so it was Bursa, and so yeah, there's different.
As Manar said, the cafe culture is really a Mediterranean thing, and the cafes have been in Cairo for 5 centuries. I think it was when Napoleon expedition came, there was someone was called Jabarti, was a writer at the time, and he had counted the ahwas, the cafes, and there were already thousands of cafes. So people were already going out, and it continues. So yeah, there is a cultural element about it. But we didn't want to just restrict ourselves to the people to go to cafes or the people who are there for leisure, because obviously, there's a big informality in Egypt, like a lot of people who are kind of doing whatever they can on the streets. There's a lot of unemployment also in Cairo, and we wanted to show that a lot of the people that spend time on the sidewalk don't spend time by choice. They are there because they have to earn money, and even though they don't question it that much, they tell you oh, we're here, we have to do it, this is what we have to do. But in reality, when you ask them how they spend their time, it's very long periods of emptiness, of wait, of it's not the most, exciting thing to do. So we wanted to show both aspects really, leisure, but also kind of economics of it.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to attend your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.